Well, ladies and gentlemen, so today we are doing a unique video again, and this video is actually regarding mental illness. And how is it that you can detect mental illness, and you can see if a person is experiencing symptoms related to mental illness. Not everybody is full-blown mental. If there is something, they can be schizophrenic, they can have Asperger's, they can have autism, they can have acute autism, they can have ADD and ADHD mixed with a little bit of autism. And then some people can experience things that are real, yet the other people are not willing to accept that. And that's one of the most important things about mental illness, is that if you ask yourself what is mental illness, not everyone really has the right answer, including the scientist. The scientist will simply say is that, well, we see the brain scanning, and we see that this part of the brain is lit very little, which is logical, and then this part of the brain, which is deals with other things, is lit up very brightly, as you can see in mental patients. Or they will diagnose them through a psychiatrist or psychologist. They will look at their behavior and everything, and that's how they're clinically claimed as being mentally ill. But seriously, mental illness is very hard to define, because when you ask the person, are you mentally ill, most of the time they will say, no, I'm not mentally ill. This is what happens to me. This is what I experience. Because I read a very good article from a shaman just about a month ago. And this Indian shaman kind of said that people in the Western side of the world are very quick to judge on things, on when somebody's having hallucinating experience, when somebody's having an experience of seeing things that are not there, which most of the time is what? Schizophrenia. Okay, kind of like what John Nash experienced in his life. But the thing is, in this article, it also said that when your frequency of your body is somehow clashing or gaining access to the frequency of the other world, what happens is that two things mix up. The two frequency mix up, where the individual starts seeing things from other dimensions, other side of life, which is not present through the naked eye. And only when this frequency mashes in with each other, that a person is able to experience hallucination, able to see things that are not there, or think it's there, other people don't think they're there. And this is the person who's clinically claimed as being crazy or mentally ill, where we need to look deeper into what exactly is this person experiencing. So there's all these world views. You have the shaman view, you have the astrological view, you have spiritual views, and then you have the scientific views. Most of the world is on scientific view, that okay, they're mentally ill, okay, they need help. But in astrologically, what are the combination that you can see if someone is mentally ill, or someone is really going to experience something that is out of this world, or if someone is temporarily experiencing things where their brain is just not able to function logically? Because that, there are actual mental ill people. So for that, what we look for in especially Vedic astrology is, first of all, we are looking at the first and seventh axis of a person, the first house and the seventh house. And we want to see, especially if Saturn and Mars are mutually aspecting each other. And then we also want to see, while they mutually aspect each other, is the fifth house, which is a house of intelligence, okay, is the fifth house in a good shape or not? And these are some of those classical, combinations that you go through, especially seeing that if moon and sun are together, where moon, the mind, because remember, moon is the mind. You always have to see the mind when it comes to mental illness. Is the mind being completely burnt and eclipsed by the sun? Because remember, there's a no moon when sun and moon are conjunct with each other at a close degree. And especially if it's a waning moon through the degrees, that will show that the mind just either suddenly has bursts of anger, or is not able to just think properly because there's so much heat within the mind. But in my experience, especially when last week I did some, consultation for people, for mothers and fathers who have their child, diagnosed with autism and diagnosed with this illness and that mental illness, schizophrenia, and I did literally looked at 150 to 120 to 150 charts of you from Facebook who sent me regarding people who were mentally ill that you knew in your life, and you sent me their information. So that's where kind of classical abbreviation of mental illness wasn't really there, but it was kind of there. But the main thing that I experienced regarding mental illness was, first of all, the affliction of the moon, the mind. Is the mind afflicted? Is the mind afflicted with malefic planets? Okay, so moon, situations of the moon is very important to see. Same thing, it's something known as Pap Kartri Yoga, meaning two malefic planets are pressuring moon in a house. Meaning moon is in one house, there are two malefic planets, 12th and 2nd to the moon. Shows the mind is feeling tremendous amount of evil pressure on itself. And then one of the most important things that I noticed regarding mental illness was the involvement of the nodes, the north node and the south node, Rahu and Ketu, and most importantly, something known as functional malefic planets. Functional malefic planets are planets whose Mool Trikon sign is sitting in the 6th, 8th or 12th house. Especially 8th and 12th house, I noticed, were the houses where these lords were really causing mental pressure on a person. And I've made a video on functional malefic and benefic, so you want to check that video out before you even try to understand this video. But one of the major things that I noticed with these situations is that anytime Rahu was involved with moon, very closely conjunct, while moon was waning, not waxing, waning moon conjunct Rahu and the axis of Ketu, and at the same time a functional malefic planet was aspecting or conjunct moon. This is one of the most common things I saw in a mental ill patient. Because remember, Rahu is illusion, smoke. It kind of shows you things that are not there. So mainly when we see mentally ill people, Rahu has become a very prominent player in that. Now, what if moon was conjunct Ketu? What happens then? This is where it becomes tricky. Because what I noticed with people with moon and Ketu conjunction is, or moon with Ketu aspect in the 1st house, 6th house, 8th house, 12th house, were not so much crazy, but so much more having access to the other side of the world. Because a psychic, a person who can suddenly see things that are to happen, that will happen, or that have happened, really always had connection with Ketu. Because Ketu is what? Ketu is sorcery, mysticism, and mystical things that are not to be understood with the 5 senses we have. Because if you remember how Krishna had Ketu and moon conjunction in the ascendant, how he was himself was a psychic, how his birth literally brought sorcery when all the doors to the jails open. So with Ketu and moon conjunction, you have to be very careful, because this person, if they're experiencing something that is not real, most likely it is probably what they're seeing is real. It's just that we as third party cannot see that, what they have the connection to. Because Ketu moon conjunction opens up certain part of the brain through its vibration and frequency that opens you up to a different dimension. Opens you up to things that are here, yet only a few are allowed to see. But let's also discuss Rahu's connection as well regarding mental illness and the function of functional malefic. So functional malefic planet has been very, substantially involved in illnesses and mental illnesses. Next thing I obviously saw of a person, actually many of them I saw, where Mercury itself was a functional malefic. Moon was fine, but Mercury, the logical mind and logical thinking, where I know not to hit someone just because, for no reason. That's Mercury. That tells you, no, they haven't done anything to you, don't hit them. That becomes a functional malefic, let's say for an Aquarius ascendant. And Mercury, I saw, was mostly sitting in the first, second, or third house. And especially Mercury conjunct Ketu and Rahu axis as a functional malefic really made the person just have erratic behavior. They didn't know who to hit, when to hit. They were hitting their parents. They were hitting their mother and father. Same thing I saw with Mercury controlling the Virgo sign in the 6th house or 12th house. They had extreme amount of erratic behavior. It wasn't just simply crying and laughing and being depressed. It was just like they didn't know how to calculate things. They just did not know what to do with the food when they pick up. They would throw the food when they pick up with the spoon. So you see how logical mind, when it becomes a functional malefic, can also affect a person. Especially, let's say, if Aquarius ascendant, the 8th Lord, Mercury is sitting in the ascendant. So definitely it's going to impact the mind, especially when Mercury is very close to the ascendant degrees. So let's say if Mercury is at 20 degrees, you were born as Aquarius ascendant at 15 degrees or 23 degrees. Mercury is very close to your degrees, within 7 degrees. So it's greatly impacting your logical intelligence out there. But some of the most common scenarios that you want to look for, when you want to judge if a person will be mentally ill or not, is first of all, you want to see the situations of the moon. How is moon situated? Is the moon receiving an aspect or conjunction from a functional malefic? And which house it's receiving in? If it's the malefic houses, 12th, 6th, or 8th, or the 1st and the 5th house, because 5th house is intelligence. A moon conjunct and functional malefic in the 5th house can really show that the person is not able to grasp the idea of how to behave intellectually in society. Meaning, like, somebody can also become a criminal with this, where they do not know how to behave out there. They can do things that they feel they're right. They can stab someone because they didn't like what they were wearing. But in society, that's not right thing to do. So you want to see involvement of moon with the nodes, Rahu especially, and then with the functional malefic, and especially you want to see planet like Saturn impacting Rahu as the functional malefic. You want to see the hemming of Mercury and moon with malefic planets, especially a functional malefic planets who's a natural malefic, hemming these two planets. And obviously one of the classical ones that I said was the 1st and 7th axis of Mars and Saturn, while the 5th house is damaged, or mutual aspect of Mars and Saturn, where moon and sun are conjunct. And these are, out of the 150, these were the most common things that I just kept seeing. But what else can you see deeply as to what the person will do? How their mind is going to behave. Will they recover from these things or not? For that, you want to look for the Trim Samsa chart, which is a chart in Vedic astrology that you really look for misfortunes in life, health concerns in life. And there you want to confirm if a functional malefic in that particular chart is conjunct moon, Mercury, if Mercury moon are becoming functional malefic, sitting in the ascendant, 3rd house or 5th house, because then these planets being functional malefic themselves can produce these effects, especially if they're both being impacted in the birth chart and the Trim Samsa chart. But one thing I still have to work on a lot is something that I have found again in the past 6 years, is people with conjunction of moon and Ketu really did have some things that they saw that were real, yet the world was not able to see. So if you have this conjunction or aspect of Ketu closely on moon, and you see things and you feel like nobody's wanting to understand you, you're experiencing poltergeist, or you're experiencing demonic things, or you're experiencing, ghosts and seeing things, and you feel that people think you're crazy, you may not be crazy, because Ketu is that moksha planet that kind of gives you the access to the other world away from the physical things that we see here, like this SUV, my clothes. The other world, which can be negative, positive. Remember, Ketu is blind. He'll just simply give you an access based on your karma. He'll give you access to the world of psychic, like the Long Island medium who helps people by connecting with their loved ones. Or you might experience, demonic entities. You might get possessed. You feel like, somebody's always following you, and they probably are. So this is something I still have to work on more. So this is not something I'm saying that Ketu will never bring mental illness. It can definitely bring erratic behavior, because Ketu is explosion. Like usually terrorists are seen with Ketu. But Ketu has many dimensions to itself that we must see. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because I saw people, schizophrenic people, who had involvement of Ketu more than Rahu. And they were seeing things. And what happens is that Ketu is probably opening up access to the other world, yet also keeping them in this world where it's just mixing them apart. Your brain is not able to handle. Like, what am I seeing? Is it real? Is it not? Can you see? Or you can't see, but I can see. Yet what these people have to do as a remedial measure that, I feel it's not something scientifically proven, I'm not saying this is the remedy that will work, but meditation is the cure for all evil. If you feel that you have access to the other side and you want to fully experience that, you want to experience Kriya Yoga, meditation, something that Yogananda came to United States to do, which called self-realization. You suddenly realize your spiritual side of life more than the material side of life, and you suddenly, I saw the documentary where a billionaire gave up all his wealth to be with Yogananda. That's how powerful self-realization is. So when you are experiencing these kind of things, meditation under a proper guru can really show you what you see is real, and if it's real, if you gain full access to it, will you be able to benefit from it? And these are the things we're going to have to answer through a very well qualified guru who has experienced Kundalini, who is kind of like in the stature of Yogananda. Go to a shaman if you have to, go to a priest if you have to. Because people on the alternative side of science, alternative side of mundane life, are able to understand you better. So instead of you telling people who really will laugh at you or think you're crazy because you're experiencing these things, and they say, prove it to us, and you're like, I can't, only I'm the one who sees them, that's where the trouble can come in. And there's a fine line between that. If Moon, let's say, receives a benefic aspect from a good planet, Jupiter, who may be a functional benefic, and then also Moon is conjunct Ketu, it can show the positive side to experiencing angels and spiritual things, Kundalini. You're finally awakened as a enlightened person. So there's a fine line between calling somebody mentally ill, calling somebody a psychic, or simply a mentally deranged person who can even kill. Now, are things permanent or temporary in people's lives? Well, let's discuss that too. The way you can see if a person experiencing temporary mental illness, or if it's permanent, that's something where Jaimini astrology comes into play. And in my own circle of family, I kind of used the scenario. In Jaimini astrology, you have karakas, the significators by degrees. Planet with the highest degree becomes Atma Karka, planet with the lowest degree becomes Dhara Karka. But the planet you want to see is known as the Ghatni Karka, planet with the sixth highest degree, that brings illnesses, diseases, misfortunes, and tragedy in life. Then you want to see if your planet, like Moon and Mercury, are conjunct Ghatni Karka in your horoscope, especially in the 6th, 8th, 12th, 1st, and 5th house, even the 3rd house. And if you go through the Charadasha of that planet, so let's say if you're 23 years old, you run through the Charadasha of your Ghatni Karka, which is Mars. Mars is conjunct Moon and in the 8th house. Suddenly you are feeling anger towards people's sexual behavior. You're feeling angry because you haven't had sex for a long time, or you're having sudden bursts of anger for eight years plus, and you get into fights with people, you hit your wife or husband, you are suddenly feeling like your mind just wants to experience violence. In this case, what we can say is that this person for this 8 years is experiencing these things because they're going through the Charadasha of the sign where Moon conjunct the Ghatni Karka or Mercury conjunct the Ghatni Karka are activated. So you want to look for these things and see if that's temporary. You can also experience that in Mahadasha, Vimshotri Mahadashas. If Moon is, conjunct Rahu, you're going through Moon Mahadasha, that will be the most severe time for you to experience the most mental agony. Versus other times you can keep it in control. But mainly though, more than even Vimshotri Mahadasha, Charadasha has played a very important role in seeing these things where people also had temporary, impact of mental illness, whether through depression and suicidal thoughts, whether through, wanting to hit people or just seeing things that are not there. Ghatni Karka and Charadasha played a huge role. So look at your own chart in this, or your ones who are experiencing these things, and see if you find these combinations in them. If you do, let me know in the comments and let me know, hey, this is the combination I see, because I'm telling you the most common combination I've seen for people experiencing this sixth world things, whether you call them mental illness or not. Okay, so guys, this was my analysis of mental illness. If you're new to my channel, subscribe below. And again, if you want to know where your planetary chart is placed and if you have mental illness, because you probably are crazy if you're on my channel, for that, check out the links here and check out my full astrological report, including my books and all my other options. Otherwise, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.